Hello and welcome to Penguin Book Club. This is a place to come and delve into all those classics you always wanted to read. And today we'll be chatting about Elizabeth Gaskell's North and South. I'd like to firstly welcome Susanna Fullerton as our resident queen of the classics at Penguin's Book Club. And Susanna has been president of the Jane Austen Society of Australia for the past 18 years. She's also patron of the Pickering Society of Australia, a founding member of the New South Wales Dickens Society, and of the Australian Bronte Association, and a member of the Dylan Thomas Society of Australia. Susanna is Sydney's best-known lecturer on classic novels, and she lectures regularly at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. Welcome, Susanna.
Hi.
I'd also like to welcome Sarah Burns, President of the Australian Bronte Association. Louise Owens. Hi. Louise Owens, author of the blog readmeblogsite.net. Hi, Louise.
Hi.
And Jo Henwood, founder of the Swashbucklers and the founding member of the Australian Fairy Tale Society.
Hello.
And of course, we'd also like to welcome back book club members watching our Hangout on air. And don't forget to pop your questions into the comments and we'll do our best to get to them during the Hangout. So to the book, North and South traces the Hale family as they relocate to the north, where former Reverend Mr. Hale becomes a private tutor. And our heroine, Margaret, tries to reconcile herself to a new and unlovely environment. She dislikes the business and the coarseness of the inhabitants and is disdainful of the prominence of the business in public life. She meets Mr. Hale's friend and pupil, Mr. Thornton, in interesting circumstances. He's one of Milton's most influential and wealthiest manufacturers, and he garners her disapproval from the start. Through a tumultuous time in the northern lands of England, we follow the lives and loves and tribulations of the Hales and the distinct contrast of the North and South. Susanna, tell us more about this incredible novelist and novel.
Well, Elizabeth Gaskell, the author of this wonderful book, and I think it's one of the finest of 19th century novels, grew up in the countryside. She was born in 1810 in London, but most of her childhood was fairly rural. However, she married a man called the Reverend William Gaskell. He was a Unitarian minister, and the Unitarians very strongly believed in practical good works. So as the wife of a minister, she had to move to Manchester, which of course was a big, stinking, dirty, industrial city with tremendous poverty. And she encountered the mill workers, the mill owners, and was on the whole pretty horrified by what she saw. Now, in 1848, she published a novel called Mary Barton, looking at the very tough lives of people working in the cotton mills in Manchester, although she changes the name of the city. And this book created quite a storm of protest. The mill owners said she'd been very unfair. She hadn't shown their side of the story. She'd been too sympathetic to the workers. And she really copped a lot of trouble over that novel. So some years later, she decided to write North and South, and that book was published in 1855. And in that book, she tried a little bit to redress the balance, to show sympathetic mill owners who were willing to learn and to change, to talk to their men, like John Thornton, and also, of course, to show the terrible plight of people working in those mills. We get the death of Bessie Higgins, who's got that dreadful cotton in her lungs and dies from what today we would call an industrial disease, but of course at that time not really much recognized. So she again didn't succeed in pleasing everybody. Again, there was a problem for her when the novel was published, but it is a much finer book than Mary Barton is. Mary Barton's a very bleak, tragic novel, and she gives North and South a happy ending, and although there are a lot of deaths in the novel, there's a lot of tragedy in the book, in the end, of course, it does have a happier ending. And so it has remained one of her most popular novels, and I think in many ways is an extremely modern novel, in the way it looks at strikes and the relationships between owners or bosses and their workers. It is a very modern novel indeed, and I think a truly great novel. But let's start off by discussing the heroine of this novel, because, of course, Margaret Hale is going very much on a learning journey in the course of this book. She's led a sheltered life in the south with relatives who had money. She's lived in a very pretty part of England, and suddenly all of that changes. She moves to the dirty, cold, smelly, busy, productive, energetic industrial north, and she finds it a shock. She meets John Thornton. She finds that a shock as well. She makes friends that she would never have dreamt of having, anything to do with down in the south. So I think she's a really fascinating character. And I'd like, first of all, to ask how you all responded to Margaret. Did you like her as a character? Do you find her too good, too feisty? How do you react to Margaret Hale?
I thought she was really fascinating. I must admit that the novel was like a debate. So many things, as you said, north and south, rich and poor, religion, but unions and bosses. But I found it very hard to warm towards Margaret. I was very much on the John Thornton side. I thought she was very sedate and had too much of a good thing, and John was all for change in industry, and I found him the more fascinating of the two, I must admit.
Yeah. Sarah, how did you respond to Margaret?
Well, I think she had a lot to deal with. Her parents were quite pathetic, really. I mean, her father didn't want to tell her mother that he'd given up his calling, his life, their home, and was moving to another area. It was left to Margaret to do that. All the big decisions were left to Margaret. Even she had the secret that her mother was dying and kept that from her father. I mean, she was burdened with a lot of things. So she arranged the move or assisted with the move to Milton. All the big decisions, she seemed to be the one having to do it all, and representing her mother at things, and then her father, and I think she had a lot to deal with, and her pride wears away.
It does, yes. We see that changing, and for such a young girl, she has a huge amount to deal with, and I think in many ways her parents are more like children by the end of the novel. She's the one that's having to look after them, guide them, protect them, cheer them, organise for them. She's in a very tough position.
And
Jo,
she's a teenager.
So, yes, I find her very easy to relate to. I could understand a sheltered middle-class girl being thrust into a world, and she's thinking all the time, I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing the right thing. And she's just, I mean, in many ways her sins are less forgivable for the 21st century. They're sins of snobbery, which is something that we find utterly repugnant. But I think that a lot of the people who read it when it was first written would have been going, oh, no, she's a Republican, she's going out talking to these people, and they wouldn't have had that sort of wouldn't have been as repelled by those things. But she changes. She's got a mind. She's got a mouth. She thinks about things, and she absorbs them, and she allows herself to be changed by circumstances. I find that fascinating, really. She grows up.
She does. She really grows and develops, doesn't she? And in the end, when she returns to the south at the end of the novel, and she's actually rather horrified by some of the things she finds there. And I think that return visit shows just how much she has learned and changed and grown as a person in the course of the novel. Now, of course, a big part of her learning journey comes from the gorgeous hero of this novel, John Thornton. What we have to do now is try to divorce from our mind the character, the actor, Richard Armitage, who played him so wonderfully and so utterly.
It's not going to happen, Susanna.
Let's just try to judge John Thornton as a character in a novel, not as Richard Armitage on our television screens, and look at him as a hero. How do we respond to him from the beginning of the book? I mean, Louise has already said she prefers him to Margaret, but Letitia, how do you respond to John Thornton? With sympathy all the way through, or do you think he's got a lot to learn as well?
I think as a modern reader, I was sympathetic to him because I also understood the time and the you know, what was happening, and it was so tumultuous, and sometimes his reactions seemed so violent, and yet that was the time, that was what it was like. And so there were times when I was like, oh yes, of course you'd react that way, that makes sense. But that just didn't mean that I favoured him above Margaret. I was partial to her. But I think he also develops and grows throughout the film. Oh my God. Throughout the I can't stop thinking about it.
I think we also, you know, he's got the opposite problem from Margaret's got these very weak, very dependent parents. He, of course, has lost his father, tragically, along with money, and then he's got this incredibly domineering and strong mother, and he's got this utterly pathetic sister who's weak. And I think what he's looking for, isn't he, is something in between his mother and his sister. Somebody who's not quite as domineering and bossy as his mother, not as hard, but also somebody who's not just a useless piece of lace and frills like his sister is. So I think he finds her in Margaret at the end of the novel, but he's also got problems with parents and a challenging background to cope with, hasn't he?
But I like the beautiful things that he does. You know, he's such a gentleman when the Hales move north, and he arranges for the wallpaper to be changed, even though the landlord had no intention to do that. So there's just these beautiful things he does behind the scenes that make him that real gentleman. You know, he felt he had to propose to Margaret after she threw herself, and the speeches that he makes, I think they're so beautiful.
Yes.
Just it's the quintessential, fantastic moments. Yeah, that was.
And the other thing, of course, is that he colludes in her lie. That lie takes on such big proportions, doesn't it? Which, to a modern reader, you know, people wouldn't think so much about telling a little fib to protect a beloved brother. But Margaret, of course, is telling that lie, and John Thornton knows it is a lie, and he protects her from the police. So. That's another lovely thing that he does, isn't it? Yeah.
Gaskell is brilliant. Sorry, I was going to say Gaskell, I think, is absolutely a master at entering into his heart, to seeing the world from his eyes, and all these emotions that are surging out of him that are not expressed physically or in words, but you can feel his. I mean, that beautiful, beautiful scene near the beginning when he's watching the bracelet on her arm slip down, and he's just infatuated with her, and it's just drawn him in, and he can't take his mind away from that. And it follows on with another scene where you know, he only glances at her once, but at all times he knew where she was and what she was doing. And
he's physically so aware of her, and as television viewers, we are physically so aware of him. Every scene that he's in, we're certainly female viewers are gazing with great admiration, because he's just such a wonderful John Thornton in the television adaptation. Yeah. Sarah, how do you respond to him, like the rest of us?
Yes, it's all the little things, and a lot of it comes through in the book that you don't necessarily get in the film version. You know, it's the little kindnesses, the looks, that wonderful description, as Joe just mentioned, of that room. He knew exactly where she was and what she was wearing, and like every movement, and she thought he didn't notice her. But he was very aware. All the kind things, the wallpaper, the fruit for her mother, the carriage for the funeral, you know, putting a stop to the inquest so she didn't perjure herself. Even when, at the end, when he finds out that Frederick's the brother, not the lover, and, you know, he wants to know more about her, he goes to Helston to find out where she's come from, and gets that rose to take back to her.
It's a lovely moment, isn't it? Yes. Now, this is a novel that's very much about contrasts, the contrast between the North and the South, the mill owners and the mill workers, between the rich and the poor, the rural landscape and the industrial landscape, you know, people that are deeply religious and people who are losing their religious faith. So this is a book that's very, very strongly based on contrasts. And I think Elizabeth Gaskell handles that very, very well, doesn't she, in the book, that we're constantly made aware of these very big differences. How do you think she brings out some of those differences?
Well,
I go.
No, I was going to say at the beginning we've got the poor Hales and the rich Thorntons, and then at the end, and it's the big house and everything's magnificent, but at the end, Margaret's the one with the money.
Yes.
And she does the kindness. He's at her, well, I mean, he thinks he's going to lose everything, and she would never do that to him. You know, they're just good people. So there's the contrast of, you know, who's rich and who's poor, and there's a lot of pride. He's given the opportunity to go speculating like his brother-in-law, but chooses not to because of his family history with his father. There's a lot of contrast, but it comes down to good people and values and respect.
Yes.
One of the things that I really love about the book, I find it a very grown-up book. It's not in some never world. Everything's clearly focused. It's not one of those things where, oh gosh, if only they'd had a conversation in chapter 2, you know, they were made for each other, it would all be working out. It's something where there are real cultural differences that they have to work through. These are real grown-up problems of economy, of social class, of religious differences that have to be worked through. And I think that's perhaps why what you were referring to, Susanna, when you said it's a very modern novel. It's got those things. And, I mean, with an historical viewpoint, I love reading Gaskell because in so many other books, it's just, oh, they went into the room. Well, you know what the room looks like. But you know what the books on the shelf look like. You know what the mantelpiece is decorated with. You know how the table is set. Everything's in a high focus because it's all real and it all matters. It all signifies something. And if you pay attention to it, it's all communicating to you if you would just pay attention.
Well, that's very interesting because the two rooms are described. The Hales have a room that's lived in. The books have just been left down. The sewing has just been put down. In the Thorntons, it's almost all wrapped in plastic.
Yes. And Mrs. Thornton's parlour sounds a terribly uncomfortable room, doesn't it? And she sits ramrod straight in it, and everything's sort of over-decorated and there for display, but it's not a comfortable room that anyone can relax in. What about the religious aspects of the novel? Because the whole move to the north, of course, takes place because Mr. Hale has religious doubts. And Elizabeth Gaskell doesn't go into those in any great detail. But there are a lot of other aspects in this novel about religion. We've got Bessie Higgins, who's a sort of born-again evangelist and is dying but gains a great deal of comfort from her religion. At the end of the novel, we hear that Frederick, the son, is turning Catholic. So we've got a variety of religious beliefs in this novel. And how does that work with a modern reader? You know, Bessie's long speeches about the Lord and going to heaven and the religious aspects of the novel, do you think they're off-putting to a modern reader?
They're awfully non-judgmental, actually, considering that Gaskell was a minister's wife. She's nowhere near as you know, well, all these other people are wrong, and here are my characters.
Unitarians had a great deal of tolerance for other religions, so I think that comes through in this novel. You know, she was not Church of England; she was Unitarian, and therefore was much more tolerant than, say, an average Church of England writer would have been. But Sarah, do you find Bessie's long religious speeches a bit much in the novel, or do you enjoy them? Or
no, I find well, they're interesting. It's interesting.
And you read them.
Sort of. But if you think at the time,
Letitia, how do you find the religious aspects?
Well, I think I do find it interesting, but I found them sometimes they went on a bit too much for me. I thought the point could have been, she's so concise in so many other ways, and I think there were so many other things happening. Sometimes it was like, okay, let's get through that. Just keep going.
But do you think it's a sign of the times? I mean, John Martin was doing those paintings of Milton, the descriptions of Milton, so they were very apocalyptic. So it might have been a reflection of what the society was discussing. And
yes.
Yes.
And for somebody like Bessie, what else is there in her life? I mean, her life has no meaning if she doesn't have a belief that it's going to get better when she dies after a pretty horrible...
And she knows she's dying. I mean, that's no question.
Yes.
Part of that debate again, you know, some people finding their religion. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry,
Louise.
That's okay. It's a part of that debate again. Some people were finding their religion. Some people were losing their religion. Some people were deciding about their religion. It's also about what other people were thinking about those people who had changed their minds. I thought it was really interesting. I didn't mind Bessie's discussions because I thought it was such an interesting voice, and it just opened that debate again. It let the reader decide really from themselves, I thought.
Yes.
But it was the time, wasn't it? It was this industrial revolution that was happening, and all these things were happening, all these changes, and their society, the whole foundation of what they believed in was being, challenged. So, yeah, I think it's important that it was in the novel, definitely.
And that was when we actually came around to reading them. I just, there's Bessie, and Bessie, and Bessie.
Well, Gaskell went to a great deal of trouble to get Bessie's dialect correct. Her husband was a real expert on local dialects, so she got him to go through all those sections of the novel and make sure that she had written the dialect in as exact and accurate a way as possible. Now, this is very much a reform novel, written in a time of great reform, great change. She's describing the early union movement and how it's taking off and how it's being rejected by some people and what it's achieving. How effective do you think this book is as a reform novel? I mean, should it be given to union people today, union bosses today? Should they be made to read North and South?
Yes. Everybody would be better.
Not a bad idea.
Yes.
What are some of the reform lessons that this book teaches us?
Oh, I thought it was great. I loved how, the idea is they just need to talk together, which is really, really important. We heard, we heard the Thornton side, we heard Hale's side, and they were both debating. It was pretty fierce, but they wouldn't look at each other. And I thought it was great that, the idea they need to talk together, put it all out on the table and find solutions, work from there. I thought it was a great idea, and what a great idea to send it out to unions right now.
Yes.
Well, he just is such a good character, and then he's the union leader, but then he doesn't like what his members are doing. I mean, they're in dire circumstances, but is it Boucher throws the stone, and he's the one that actually causes that whole strike or the protest to come to a head, and there are consequences for that. But and it's after that Higgins actually steps back and thinks, well, no, that's not what I'm doing. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's not too humble to go and ask for a job.
Yes. Yes. To help Boucher's children.
Yes. Not for himself.
Higgins is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
He's such a great.
Yes. And again, very well done in the television version, hasn't he?
Yes.
Brendan Coyle, he's a wonderful actor.
Yes. But yeah, I think there are so many aspects of reform in this book. Let's sit down, let's share a meal, let's talk, let's see things from both sides of the question. If the union workers demand, if the workers demand too much, the boss will go out of business, and then nobody will have a job. Yeah. So all of those aspects have to be looked at and are discussed in the novel. And the whole idea of the industrial disease, I think Elizabeth Gaskell must have raised awareness about the fires that get mentioned in the mill, and the dreadful breathing in of that cotton and the horrible
stuff on the lung,
stuff on the lungs that result. So hopefully, her book did help to contribute to change in industrial Britain at that time. I think she's a very wise writer.
Yeah. There were very respectful debates too.
Yes.
You know, like there was nothing like, oh, little Margaret, don't you worry your little head about it. There's a full meeting of minds, a debate that's going on that will listen to the other person, whether it's Thornton and Margaret or Thornton and Higgins, or any of the debates that are going back. That synthesis. What is it? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis thing that's going back and forth.
Yes.
They were grappled with by listening to the other person. That respect that Gaskell has for all her characters, that she doesn't go, as so many writers do, the caricatures of the working class. She takes all her characters very seriously.
Yes, yes. George Orwell commented that Elizabeth Gaskell's style was like a window pane because it was so clear and so wonderfully luminous. You could see everything you needed to see in it, that she's not an obscure writer in her style. She's not overloading you with words that don't seem to mean all that much. I think the style is a big part of the appeal of this novel. It's an easy 19th century novel to read.
Yes. Yeah.
And it is, I think, a fabulous story from beginning to end.
I couldn't put it down.
Yeah. You leap through it, don't you?
I think it's certainly one of the books that, for us here at Book Club, we've all been so passionately in love with, which is really great.
Nothing to do with Richard Armitage. Nothing to do.
No, of course not.
That brings us to the ending of the novel. Now, the ending of the novel and the ending of the television version are different. I actually love the ending of the novel. I think the way in which they sort of touch off humour in each other, and they jokes about having his mother as a mother-in-law, I think is a lovely moment, because there's been so many deaths in this book, so much tension, so much sadness for Margaret. I love the way Elizabeth Gaskell ends it on a humorous note, as they learn to laugh together at the beginning of their lives together. But I also adored the version of the television adaptation, with the one train going north, one train going south. Two of the thing, he gives her the flower. It was wonderfully done. So, do you have favourites? A favourite ending to this book, the television or the novel?
Wow.
The television has Richard Armitage.
Oh, yeah. That's a hard one. I do love the ending of the novel, I have to say.
Yeah.
I think we've always got the novel, but the images are lovely to look at. And
yes.
Well, actually, there is a part of that ending that still irritates me. I hadn't picked it up before in our little Penguin Classic there's a big introduction that points out just how sensitive Margaret is to being looked at, and her whole issue of being on display and whether people are looking at it. And I would have liked her to get beyond it. So it's still scraped against me that her response to his profession of love is to cover her face with her hands and bury her face in his shoulder. Well, burying her face in his shoulder is kind of nice. But, that she's still hiding herself. I sort of, come on, snap out of it. You're with the right man now. Just look him in the face. This is the good part.
I love the way about
delicious silence.
After some moments of delicious silence. Yes. And of course we know that they're kissing each other for the first time in those moments of delicious silence. And I think that's a really lovely bit at the end of the novel, that she gives them that little moment of privacy to kiss each other at the end of everything they have gone through in this really remarkable book.
I think we can all agree it was definitely one of our favourites. I'd like to thank, and not just because of Richard Armitage.
I think we all need to go home and watch it all again.
It's our duty.
I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for Penguin Book Club today. Our next book club will be on the 14th of August, where we'll be reading Henry James' Washington Square, so that's going to be fantastic. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much to our book clubbers, Jo, Louise, Sarah, and Susanna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And